Hey y'all, Mac here. Welcome to my Bone Blast Bonestorm Blood Mage build guide. I want to preface this by saying that this version of the build is extremely min-maxed, and obviously there's still some room for improvements. Some of the gear that I have currently that I'll be showing is not correlating with some of the clips. Some of the clips are using older gear, but it's not that big of a difference, and the same mechanics and build scaling still apply. And I will go over everything in my mobalytics and the rest of this build video. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so how does this build play and what content can it do? Well, let's start off with the content. I think it can clear most bosses at the hardest difficulty, albeit I think that my personal knowledge of the bosses just isn't good enough to clear some of the T4s. The damage it has is plenty, and it can tank some of the scarier big attacks from the bosses. I'm able to tank most of the brief short slams on the highest difficulty. But you do kind of have to play well in order to do them on this build. This build can't like true one-shot them. However, I don't know if it's going to get nerfed. I'm hoping Bonestorm doesn't get nerfed and it stays as strong as it is, but we'll see. Nonetheless, I think that it's definitely excels now in mapping, specifically doing stuff like ritual and like tighter spaces, and I'll go over the mechanics for that. So this build relies on being as simple as possible with just pretty much 2 buttons. Frostwall is kind of a cheesy thing. You can break frost walls as a blood mage, and they can drop these health orbs. So sometimes I'll just like buff up my HP before bosses, but with instant leech, this is kind of like just not that. There's not much of a purpose to it. More importantly, how this build works is through Bone Blast, which is a 0-cost wand basic attack. And it actually has some really good coverage when you scale the AoE. Like, you can see this. In tighter spaces like this, it's going to shotgun with Spell Cascade. And so you'll have multiple circles overlapping and doing damage that way. It's pretty powerful as a clear skill, and it can kill rares pretty fast, especially in tighter spaces. Albeit, the damage isn't great, especially because it starts out at level 18, but it's enough to clear all the T15, 16, and 17 maps, so I'm not too concerned about that. The actual single target damage of this build that I now only reserve for bosses is going to be Bonestorm. You can see this is a little scary. It costs 1500 life per second channeling Bonestorm. So this is pretty much you can stand pretty far away from a boss. Like, you can off-screen bosses with the ability. But Bonestorm basically channels a bunch of shards and just shoots them out. These do a first initial hit damage and a AoE damage. And I want to say that the AoE that they do afterwards can also shotgun. So scaling AoE both enhances our Bone Blast as well as our Bonestorm damage. But the Bonestorm scaling on AoE is a little bit sketchy. Like, I don't know how much it shotguns. So I wouldn't like take magnified effect on it. Alright, so getting into the skill gems, our main clearing skill is going to be Bone Blast. We're playing Magnified Effect, Arcane Tempo, and Spell Cascade, as well as Fast Forward. So, reason why we take Arcane Tempo, and specifically for the cast speed and not on our Bonestorm, is because we want to be able to cast this as fast as possible. Getting stunned with this build means we're not leeching because we can't cast and we can't deal any damage to leech back our life. And as such, we want to lower the cast time as much as possible so that we're always hitting enemies with this, leeching our life back, and potentially stunning them. But more importantly is just the fact that this is our main clear skill in mapping. And Spell Cascade is actually what allows the ability to shotgun and overlap. So you can see that there's two other sigils overlapping this, kind of like a Venn diagram. Fast Forward is honestly more quality of life. You don't need to run this. But you can see if I take Fast Forward off, the sigil takes a bit to actually wind up and do damage. So as the sigil's like kind of lighting up, it's not doing damage. It only does damage on that right there. Basically when it lights up fully. Fast Forward is going to make this a little bit faster. And so you'll have less delayed damage. But you can also run pin support instead, which, you know, pins enemies, which is pretty cool. As far as being a Blood Mage goes, we're playing Life Remnants, Clarity for the mana regen, so we can sustain Mind Over Matter a little bit better, and Cannibalism, just to get life recovered on kill, and this combined with 2 mana recover on kill gems means we're basically unkillable in maps unless we get one shot. I'm running Life Tap, Physical Mastery, Scattershot, Brutality, and Considered Casting on my Bonestorm. The most important notable gems, this is going to mean we do no chaos or elemental damage, so don't try to scale any of those, even through conversion. Consider casting slows down our cast speed a little bit, but it gives us way more damage, and I think that's way more important. On top of that, Scattershot, while it does lower our cast speed and damage, the important thing is it gives 2 projectiles, and this isn't on top of the 20 maximum. This actually increases our projectiles generated per stage by 2. And that's really important, because if we take this off, you can see I run out of HP before we can even fully generate our max Bonestorm hit. But if we put this on, it doesn't take our full health bar to generate that. And you'll just get better damage on bosses in that you can kind of like generate some, hit them, generate, hit, and then run and whatnot. As long as you're hitting the boss, you'll leech all of your life back anyways. Physical Mastery for +1s. Gem levels are a huge part of this build's damage. And Life Tap, because we are running Mind Over Matter with that setup. If we take Life Tap out, honestly, with how much mana regen I have, it's kind of sustainable. But then we have to solve our sort of like mana issue when we're not, like trying to spam this, you know, and it's okay, but I'd prefer to just have my mana be a second health bar, especially with how much I'm scaling. Besides that, our utility stuff is going to be Blink with Ingenuity. I'm pretty sure Mobility does nothing, I just threw it in because why not? Blasphemy, I'm running Enfeeble and Ritualistic Curse for more area effect. I don't think Expanse works either. Again, I just have it in there because I can. It's probably doing nothing. So these 2 are the main ones. You can run Temp Chains if you want reduced action speed on monsters. I like this because it's just 70% less damage from bosses more than anything else. And it also kind of lets me just stand in stuff if I really want to. Frostwall, like I said, it's a pretty funny skill. I don't think it's really necessary for this build. Like you can kind of just ignore it, but you can break these walls to get HP orbs. And so one other thing to note, you can play Inspiration on Bonestorm if you have enough of a enough mana regen, and this kind of works. The big issue here is if you do like get hit with a big hit and your mana goes down, you won't be able to cast it. Meanwhile, your HP bar should still be up. On top of that, if you run out of HP to cast a skill because you're getting hit, instead you can just Bone Blast the target, the boss, and that should help you restore your HP to keep casting Bonestorm. That way mana just becomes a straight up health bar and nothing else. Alright, so moving on to the skill tree, we are a Blood Mage and we are taking Sanguimancy, Vitality Siphon, Grasping Wounds, and Crimson Power. So Sanguimancy is the one we always have to take. It just adds an extra life cost to our spells. It's not split or anything. GGG, please split it. Please, please, please. Anyways, since we're playing Life Tap, we're just basically regenerating life through Life Remnants and Vitality Siphon. Gore Spike is really high value with how much life we have right now, but at the same time, there's just no way to sustain casting a high-level Bonestorm at level 34. So Vitality Siphon is a must. But I'll get into another item, Aziri's Acuity, which pairs pretty well with this Ascendancy node. Grasping Wounds is Progenesis from PoE 1, and it kind of helps mitigate some one-shots. It's also good against like a bunch of smaller hits, and it lets us just kind of like stand still in some mechanics as long as we're instant leeching. At the same time, it's not going to stop like constant streaming damage from like a ground effect or anything like that. Crimson Power is pretty powerful in terms of just providing us with a bigger, HP pool. My body armor is 1000 ES, and so we're getting 1018 life just from this, and it's pretty massive value because you also get ES, right? And so ES is going to be converted to mana through Eldritch Battery, and that mana is going to be used as an additional life pool. So we're basically double dipping that in that sense. Do keep in mind increased ES scaling values do not apply to Eldritch Battery, so taking any increased ES on the tree is kind of bait. Alright, so as far as the tree goes, there's a couple things to go over. It's mostly pathing towards physical and crit scaling nodes, and then some AoE, cast speed, mana. But for the most part, we're scaling damage on the tree as per usual. Starting off on the left side, I'm taking all these nodes because I have a Time Lost Sapphire that gives me spell damage on the small passives, and more importantly, crit chance and crit damage bonus on the notables. And so I want to take these notables as long as they have decent value. I have, 5 here, which is pretty solid. These unfortunately don't have any value, but if someone's playing like an ES variant, you could also run these, which is pretty beefy, this little area right here. Arcane Surge on crit is pretty important for this build just to maintain survivability in maps. And on bosses, it gives us a little bit more cast speed, so our Bonestorm takes less life overall, and we can get more maximum hits out. Mana is just an extra defensive layer, so scaling anything with mana is pretty alright. We're even taking Touch of the Arcane to get more Arcane Surge effect. Obviously, in Mind Over Matter, Eldritch Battery, we're converting all our ES to mana, and we're getting a lot of base ES from our gear. And so we pretty much have a double life pool. Our total net life is well over 6,000. Now, besides this jewel, I did also find a +3 Bonestorm skills jewel. I got this for 15 div at the time, and I'm not sure how the prices are going to be. I had to go through a little bit of pain searching this, basically looking for, Prism of Belief at 11 div, 12 div, 13 div, so on and so forth, until I found one with +3 Bonestorm. And I will say, this is a pretty marked damage boost, so you have like 156k. If I take this off 3 levels... Oh, yeah. I forgot. It's a lot, but the tooltip is actually bugged, so when you put this in and when you take it out, you won't actually see a difference. You have to relog. I'm not going to do that, but yeah, it's a lot of damage, just +3 skills in general, right? So if you're able to find one, I would definitely go for it. It's a really big upgrade. Besides that, it's going to be crit chance, crit damage, and any spell damage, AoE, effective curse. AoE curse is okay too. What's notable for mapping, you don't need this for bossing, but mapping, you definitely want recover mana on kill just to sustain your defenses. Alright, so as far as the gear goes, there is a couple options, and there's a lot of flexibility with what you can run. Being that the most important thing to scale our damage is Bonestorm gem levels, you want a +5 wand and crit, and the other stats are kind of up to you, but you want a lot of crit on your wand, because this is one of 2 gear pieces that can really give you a lot of crit chance. The cast speed is honestly something that's really nice quality of life. I would say it's actually probably higher value than the % increased spell damage or spell physical, and the mana is also just icing on the cake if you can get that. But if you can get 2 spell damage double rolls, that also works. Any gain as extra elemental damage is just completely useless, and it's because we're running Brutality. So I don't really think you need to search for any mods like that. It's just really crit and spell levels. As far as the focus goes, you want +2, and you want crit. Everything else, again, is kind of extra icing on the cake. So this is a focus I actually just got recently after filming, and beforehand I was using something like this. The energy shield recharge rate was actually crit. I evolved it and it bricked it, so But yeah, you want as high crit as possible on this, ideally at least 75%, but prioritize the +2 and crit before anything else. Cast speed, again, is something that you probably want third, and increased damage is something that's just going to scale your overall Bonestorm damage by quite a bit afterwards. On the Amulet, then, you also want +3 all spell skills. The crit chance is nice, and the all res is just something I need personally. You need at least 139 spirit for this setup, and so you're probably going to end up wanting a spirit amulet. Ideally, you have life on this. If you can get mana too, that's perfect, but that's going to run you a lot more. For the helmet, you want crit chance, fill reses, life and mana as able, and yeah, get high ES on your helmet, chest piece, and boots if you can. Boots, again, life, mana, move speed. Really just like fill your ES slots with as high ES as possible, but also get life and mana where as possible. It's kind of difficult because you're going to be spreading your prefixes thin. So really just try to see what's more affordable, to be honest. Again, your ES and your mana are basically your life pool as well. Now, as far as the rings go, because I'm running an Ingenuity, I was actually running a 75% for the video. I just purchased an 80 with 40 life, which is kind of nice. But you want a lot of cast speed, mana regen on these rings if possible. Life and mana are also very good. Breach rings are going to be your best bet to scale mana. If you want a high mana regen setup, then you're going to want to get them on your rings as breach rings, and you're going to want to put mana catalysts on these. You can see that this is scaling 154 base max mana to 231, and about 61% mana regen to 91, which is pretty massive. You can see without these rings, if I take both of these off, my mana regen gets cut to pretty poor numbers, honestly. But even right now, like with Arcane Surge up and active, it's it's pretty solid. It's like around 500 mana per second. So it is pretty sustainable as far as a defensive layer goes. Okay, one unique that I recommend you try to play with at least is Edzir's Acuity. This basically makes our leech from critical hits instant. What this means is whenever we leech from one of our spell damage thanks to Vitality Siphon, this is going to instantly add on to our life. And it doesn't overleech, unfortunately, but we get overleech from the health orbs. Basically, whenever we're dipping below our 3.8k or whatever HP you have, the leech is going to kick in and it's going to be instant. So you're going to fill up instantly, and your health orbs are going to start giving you overleech. And I think this is pretty powerful. Instant leech from PoE 1 has always been pretty powerful because it's just, instant recovery. It's going to counteract like the small trickle damage, because recovery from leech without instant is going to be a pretty poor way to maintain your overall like life pool. I want to say it's 8 seconds now because it's set, like leech says recover, and recover is regarded as 8 seconds now, but it could be 4. I'm not too sure. All I know is that it's a little too slow for my comfort, so I went with these. It also gives you intelligence, which is kind of nice, and some more crit. If this was ES based, it'd be better, but flasks, having gain charges is nice on flasks in extended boss fights. This build can fully sustain itself without any flasks during a boss fight, which is something I was trying to work on. As you can just Bonestorm to leech and Bone Blast to leech if you run low on HP. But at the same time, it's nice to have some decent flasks that you can get instant recovery from. And I have amount recovered on life and recovery rate on mana in case I need to get my mana back up to full. I literally just spam this mana flask till it's empty to fully recharge my mana. Thawing Charm is probably your best bet here. The Stun Charm just really isn't that good, so I would just run Thawing. And then your stun, since you have more life, it's a little bit better, your stun threshold, but it's not going to be, like, you're still going to get stunned here and there, which is why we want a low cast speed so that we can at least stun the monsters back, as well as kill them with Bone Blast. So some gearing alternatives, and whether or not you want to run Rarity is also an option. You can run Mahawaddles. If you get reses on all your gear and not the focus, you can just take this off. Obviously, it's a big damage loss. It's half my damage, if not more. Actually, it is literally more than half my damage. However, you can get a Mahawaddles with Rarity. And if you get Rarity on your rings as well, instead of like mana regen, you can actually get up to 400% Rarity if that's what you desire to do. I'm currently sitting at, I want to say like 40%, yeah, 41%. I really don't care enough. I'm doing Ritual, and I'm doing Sanctum, and I'm doing Ultimatum. So it's like, Rarity doesn't really matter for me. I also think that there's a lot of really good farms right now in the game that Rarity is not necessary for, and I also think that Rarity is going to get nerfed. And even if it doesn't, you'll still be able to sell Rarity gear, and you don't have to worry about like rolling it and whatnot for yourself. You don't have to worry about buying it, so it's going to be a lot cheaper. So yeah, I would recommend looking into maybe doing content that's not based on Rarity, but if you do want to just map Rarity, like do breaches, this build is pretty good at them, then yeah, you can opt in for Rarity. The Mahawaddles are definitely going to be more expensive, but it is a setup that I tried and it felt pretty okay. Would definitely recommend that you pick up some damage on rings then if you can with that setup. So as far as your Bone Blast goes, in order to get more radius on it, so if you hover over this and you hold down Alt, you can see Ritual Radius is scaling on meters. It won't show quality on the spell itself, but you want to Arcanist Etcher your Bone Wand to get it quality up to 20%. This will increase the radius of your Bone Blast. So as one final note about this build, the actual playstyle is pretty click intensive. You're having to click a lot on left click. You can hold it down. If you get stunned though, it actually doesn't recast, so you need to re-click it again, but it's not too big of a deal. You get used to it. And especially while mapping, like being mobile and like going through a map, you're gonna need to like click multiple times anyways. If you just hold it down, you're gonna be like walking at this speed for a while, right? So you're better off just like tapping like this. That way you're not super slow. Bonestorm is really hard to get through like a bunch of mobs, so I never really use it in maps anymore because I just have enough damage with Bone Blast. But you can use it to kill rares early on if you're struggling with damage on Bone Blast. I also do want to say this skill probably feels a lot worse without a lot of damage into it, so getting those plus skill levels are going to be really big. As far as the amulet goes, you can like opt for, you know, projectile skills if you just want to run Bonestorm and like boss content, but I would recommend getting all spells. So as far as build videos go, that's probably going to be the last major build video. I'm probably going to play this build and try to min-max it a little bit more. I might do some content video with this. I'll definitely try and come out with some like currency strategies, or at the very least like some mechanic explanations, or maybe like ultimatums. I know someone already did like ultimatums, so might try to do something else. But for the most part, I think Blood Mage it's an ascendancy that has a lot of options. I think people underestimated how much you could actually do with this. Honestly, the spell leech I think is kind of goated in being able to set up other defensive capabilities. I do think if definitely is like lagging behind the like high tier, high end archmages, and that's kind of to be expected with the state of the game right now. Post nerf, we'll see what happens. I'll make an update post nerf to see what's going on if I have the time, and we'll see. Hopefully Bonestorm stays the way it is, and hopefully Blood Mage gets a little bit more attention. Till next time, ciao. Hey, also, just a little update. Yeah, my account got hacked. I got nothing left. I actually left the maps. Yeah, I'm like literally starting from, you know, they took, what, like 70 div or something like that. I know a lot of other people are in this situation. It's a little unfortunate that there are like security concerns like this, but it is what it is. I use pretty like rigorous passwords as well. Like I have a system to kind of avoid this for the most part. So either like I'm not gonna start any conspiracies or anything like that. My items, funny enough, are actually on trade. If you want to play this build, I guess like if you can find the items, go for it. I don't really know what GGG is gonna do. It's a little unfortunate. That being said, I wasn't able to make a mobalytics guide with all the items on it, which is really unfortunate. I'll still include the tree, and I'll maybe like create the items from scratch, but they're not going to be exact, and frankly, I just don't really have the patience nor the really like the spirit to do it right now. So all's well that ends well. Hopefully GG can do something about it, and we'll see what happens. But Happy New Year, happy holidays, and have a good one.